Okay, well now we're going to introduce Pamela Sweeney. She is our Chief Water Resources Manager from Miami-Dade County's Department of Environmental Resource Management. She's going to talk to us about our plan for our reasonable assurance plan to guide Biscayne Bay restoration.
This year, ladies and gentlemen, I have an entourage. Unlike when I saw you all 2 years ago. Good morning. Thank you for this space to talk about this really interesting, challenging, and inspirational initiative called the Reasonable Assurance Plan. We have with us today not only me to talk about this, as we did 2 years ago when Dave and the coalition asked us to chat, but we've got an incredible team of experts this time around, your RAP team, that I would like to introduce you to provide a progress report and also let you know how things went at our RAP Day yesterday. And for those of you who don't know, the coalition was kind enough to host a stakeholder meeting. So all of those entities that are subject to the RAP, mostly municipalities, but also others, who have a discharge to groundwater, surface water, and we gathered a whole bunch of them yesterday right here. So we're going to provide a little bit of information about that today. So at the top of the talk, I did want to mention that a key way to follow progress right now is to engage with our Biscayne Bay Watershed Management Advisory Board. Of course, Dave is a member of that board, as possibly others in the room, as well as the state's Biscayne Bay Commission. So what you hear today is often talked about stepwise at that at those meetings. Next slide. Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right, so the image on the screen, of course, on the right is indelible in our minds. This is what we woke up to summer after summer for 3 years in a row through the great work of lots of academics in the room, organizations like Waterkeeper, volunteercleanup.org, Tropical Audubon, and others. We really got lots of images working together with the county, the state, really all levels of government and academia to really try to understand the basis of what was happening, sort of the effects of having a seagrass die-off not too far before these events started occurring and algal blooms started popping up in North Bay. But we do know that there's a reason for it, and not all of us have been as engaged in understanding how the nutrient pollution has translated into impacts like seagrass die-off and eutrophication and the impact that that has on ecosystems. Of course, Mr. Sherwood gave a great example of how Tampa Bay's come to these conclusions themselves, but the state, of course, soon recognized that we are impaired. Over 70% of Biscayne Bay's segments, or those sort of puzzle pieces you see on the screen, are impaired for nutrient pollution, either total nitrogen, total phosphorus, and or chlorophyll A. And what this means is that Biscayne Bay is not meeting or attaining its standards, its designated uses as a Class 3 water body. And basically that means that we should be able to swim, boat, otherwise enjoy and recreate and engage in our bay. And that is challenged by and is threatened by nutrient pollution. And the other thing is that, as you heard this morning, Aurella's panel that she led on the Biscayne Bay Task Force, the initiative to get this going began years ago with a recommendation out of the task force being to prioritize water quality, which was a bold move in the history of management planning for Biscayne Bay, where lots of things compete for our attention, like public access, impacts to habitat, development along shorelines, et cetera. And one of the things that the task force did in presenting this report to the board and having it accepted and move forward is creating the Watershed Advisory Board, as we've talked about. And one of their first actions was to recommend as an advisory body to our Board of County Commissioners to create a policy, a reasonable assurance plan, and directing staff to work to create that. And so today we have, through the leadership of Mayor Levine Cava and our Board of County Commissioners, an initiative financially undertaken by the county to allow space for those who are going to be subject to the RAP to really focus their efforts there. And so today what we wanted to do is talk a little bit about where we've landed in terms of how we've arrived at a place where nutrient loading really becomes the focus. In short, we know, and we've talked about this before, that there's lots of things outside of our control. When we engage with our stakeholders, our municipalities, and those other entities that will be subject to the RAP, we know what they're challenged with. We know that flooding is an issue. We know that at it's no small feat to have to address protecting neighborhoods, businesses from erosion and flooding. And as storms get more severe, as our water table rises, as saltwater intrusion is threatening our water supply, this is no small feat to compete with nutrient pollution and what we have to do to tackle that. But at the same time, while we have these obligations as governmental agencies to protect the people, to protect property, and we're facing these really large-scale issues to the right here, we know that there are things we can control. And the benefit of this is when you have a steady, consistent presence and level of activity in the bay where you're bringing that nutrient level down, when you do have a storm and you do need forward pumps, you do need to dewater because streets are flooded, it becomes less of a pressing issue. The resilience of the bay is heightened, it's enhanced, and the bay can take that brunt, whereas now, today, as you know, we get fish kills and we get algal blooms instead. So one of the things that we wanted to tackle yesterday as part of the process, since we've seen you last, is in gathering these stakeholders together to talk about progress, we wanted to also make sure that their engagement with us was sufficient to meet the mark. And where we are now is having municipalities share with us their plans to drive nutrients down through various projects and policies. It could be implementing a fertilizer ordinance of their own. It could be focusing on stormwater pollution. It could be converting septic to sewer. But we needed those projects, and we've been collecting those projects now for about a year. And we're finding that municipalities are challenged by this idea, whereas other communities around the state have been dealing with nutrient pollution and having the state impose how they will be mandated to clean up water quality through a total maximum daily load allocation, and then a basin management action plan to implement it. We haven't really been accustomed to that. And so for a lot of municipalities, this is new. And so we spent yesterday, our WRAP day, engaging municipalities in these ideas, presenting to them what kinds of projects are on the horizon, what's possible for them. And the goal, of course, was not just to do that, but to provide an update, which you'll also receive today. And the really big picture here is that a successful WRAP is only going to provide reasonable assurance to the state and to EPA, who have to approve the document, to the extent that we work together to provide that reasonable assurance. And so what I'd like to do now is introduce our panel members. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves as they take a turn. But we're going to start with Mike Wessel from ESA to talk a little bit about the pieces that go into getting us off the ground. So I'm going to ask some questions, and I'm going to pass this. You've got a mic. I'm going to take this. Yes. Okay. So, Mike, we're going to start with you.
We should have one. That one should be.
All right. I think so. Okay, Mike. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself before you give your answer. But a major goal of the WRAP is to get the water right so that we can restore seagrass habitat, as we've been hearing about this morning. This requires, in part, that we identify a time in the recent past where the bay was in healthier condition and compare that to conditions today. So if you could tell us a little about what has gone into this effort and why this step is so important, I think that'd be great for our audience to hear.
Thanks, Pamela. I'm Mike Wessel with Environmental Science Associates. I have a background in fisheries science and in biostatistics, and have been working with Tony Janicki and this team for a long time on these types of issues. And really, to get to your question, I think it all starts with the Clean Water Act and the goals of the Clean Water Act that were to provide full aquatic life support in those quotes. And the states were delegated to take that goal, essentially, and develop standards, numeric water quality standards, that would allow to maintain that full aquatic life support. And what being impaired now, being declared impaired for nutrients by the state of Florida means is that we're not meeting those goals. And so we have to find a way to set targets to get back to that healthy condition, because there was a time when Biscayne Bay was meeting its full aquatic life support goals, or fishable or swimmable, or the healthy and well-balanced population of fish and wildlife is another one. There's a lot of verbiage from DEP, but it's all good. And so, one of the most common ways of doing that is to set this reference period, or a period of time when when the water body is meeting its standards. And so we're really fortunate here to have this long-term DERM data sets on water quality and benthic habitat monitoring. I think it's been a common theme this morning is just how important those data sets are. And I'd say, I don't know of another county in the country that does as much work as Miami-Dade County does in monitoring their habitat. So kudos to you guys on that. And so we're digging into those data sets right now. This is an ongoing process. We're looking at the water quality to verify the impairments, to look at site-specific effects potentially, and then look back to a period of time when the water quality was meeting its standards, and when the ecological data that you guys have been collecting were in a healthier condition. And so we're taking a deep dive into those data sets right now. And one of the things that we've done is come up with this data dashboard where we're putting all of the analysis that we're doing into this framework where we can work iteratively with the stakeholders and with DEP to go over this information, because we really want to take a data-driven approach to this problem. And instead of saying, refer to page 400 of Appendix G, of some report, we can actually all sit in a room and ask questions and toggle through different iterations, like drop a station and see what that what that does to a certain calculation, or only focus in on a specific time period and look and see what that does to the calculation. And so what you see on the screen is this data dashboard that we're using, not for the public necessarily as much as for our RAP team. And it has these different tabs and pages of all of the different aspects or elements of the RAP that we are looking into, including hydrology, seagrass, time series information on water quality. And we're going to be going with the RAP stakeholders. We're going to be going through this stuff over the summer to really dive into the water quality and all work together to set this reference period that will allow us to get the bay back to health.
Thank you, Mike. All right, I'm going to move on to Pradeep from GHD, who's serving as a lead on our modeling team, to talk a little bit about our effort there. And Pradeep, in developing a reasonable assurance plan that's robust enough to be approved by the state and EPA, that requires a model that we can count on to calculate pollutant loadings and estimate reductions from future projects, like what we were asking our municipalities to do yesterday. Talk to us about why an integrated model approach is important and where we are in that process.
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Pradeep Nagarajan from GHD. Again, I've been working on modeling for almost the entire life, over 25 years. Feel so old sitting here, looking at all of the experts here. But I think the modeling, as everybody says, is just a tool. It doesn't give you everything, but it's an important critical component of a tool to have a defensible RAP. So I think having an integrated model means it's not just looking at a system of a complex system like Biscayne Bay, especially the geology part of it, the hydrology aspect of it, the canal side of it. You cannot have a surface model or a groundwater model or a coastal model and things of it in silos. So we needed an integrated model that can actually run the entire hydrological cycle in one system and one cohesive environment. That's why it's very critical to have an integrated model in space. So that's why if you look at the slide here, we use a suite of models provided by DHI, which runs the hydrology and have the interaction of the groundwater with the surface water through the canals, from the groundwater to the canals in Mike Plus, and then run through that biological and chemical processes to run the water quality component. So it'll be one set of suite of three models, but a complex three-dimensional integrated model that runs the runoff, the groundwater, the canals, the coastal aspect, along with the water quality. So as I was hearing to a lot of the presentations in the mornings talking about looking at different data sets and having the data sets along just on the bay or on the inland, and with the collection of data from our team on the inland side of it with respect to, I think having a model of like this, you'll be able to literally model it, calibrate it, and be able to see in near real time the trends of how these water quality pollutants are going to be accurately estimated, how it's, what's the loading rates going to be, how some of the projects, which Marcy would be talking about, the importance of it, how these projects are also going to be able to pretty much give clarity of how to reduce some of these target reductions in terms of whether it's nutrients, dissolved oxygens, or chlorophyll, or any other water quality parameters. And the big advantage with respect to the regulatory agencies like the EPA and DEP is they don't want models that just to say, hey, this is what we see and this is what they want. Really want a data-driven framework that allows them to make the decisions very clearly, and I think having a model of this magnitude allows them to do it to make that RAP moving forward much faster. Where we are today in terms of those integrated models is, if you look at the slide itself, is we are done with the first part of the hydrological cycle in terms of integrating the surface water into the groundwater. And I think as we are collecting a lot of the water quality data, and we do need all of your help to understand what data do exist there, use those data sets to move forward with developing our next step, which is the water quality component using Mike Ecolab, integrating with this Mike She and Mike Plus model. So if you need anything on specific on modeling and how we are doing it, feel free to reach out. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Pradeep. Dr. Janaki, let's go to you. Talk a little bit about target setting, an important next step in the reasonable assurance plan development. We've talked about identifying a reference period and having a robust model to help us understand where pollution can be coming from and how much load is reaching Biscayne Bay. Help us understand how we establish nutrient reduction targets and also what the new allocations would mean for Biscayne Bay, and if you see any alignment also with what Mr. Sherwood was saying about the Tampa Bay approach.
Sure. My name is Tony Janicki. I'm with Environmental Science Associates as well. I've been working in Florida for a better part of 30 years, dealing mostly with local governments, water management districts, and the state agencies, in addressing issues associated with water quality in particular, as well as issues revolving around minimum flows, understanding how much water a water body really needs. You know, listening to what Ed's presentation brought back to mind a time when I had a discussion with one of the county commissioners in the Tampa Bay area. And he was pointing out to me, he says, you realize that we're already spending a lot of money. He said, but, you know, when can you tell me when enough is enough? And what that really means is that it's not, as he put it too, I'm tired of seeing watershed plans that say the goal is to improve water quality. To what end? And that's part of the reason why we've developed this approach for developing reasonable assurance plans, like Ed talked about in Tampa Bay in particular. So what are the important elements? You know, it's important to understand the history of water quality, the history of the biota, for example, within the bay that Mike spoke to, and how important using that information is in establishing these new loading targets in particular. And then to set a loading target, first thing you need to know is what are the loadings? That's what my friend Pradeep here is doing. He's providing those estimates for us for not only the historical loadings necessarily, but more importantly, current loadings, because those two aspects of understanding how much a stakeholder is responsible for load reduction depends upon the difference between what used to be, what we had defined as that reference period, where, as Mike was saying, that the water quality and the biota were in a state that was much better than it is now. So we need that reference period and those loadings from that reference period. And also, where are we now? Because in order for us to improve the situation in Biscayne Bay, we need to know what that difference is. And it's important to go back to my friend, the county commissioner, you got to put numbers on it. It's not enough to say we're going to improve water quality. You've got to show why and how, and most importantly, is to make it as defensible as you can, because it eventually does go to those regulatory agencies that we need to deal with. But don't forget, the common goal for everybody here and for many of those agencies is to improve Biscayne Bay.
Thank you, Dr. Janicki. Okay, I'm going to pass it to Marcy from Tetra Tech to talk a little bit about our nutrient-reducing projects and our process. So we know that having a RAP means that we've got to work collaboratively to make it work, to get to a place where we can come to some level of commitment. We also know that the county, the municipality, and other entities are going to be a big part of that to reduce loading getting to the bay, as Dr. Janicki was just saying. Talk to us a little bit more about how you can foresee us actually achieving these nutrient reductions and what actions we as stakeholders who are going to be subject to their RAP can take.
All right. Thanks, Pamela. Good morning, everyone. My name is Marcy Frick, and I'm with Tetra Tech. And as Pamela mentioned, our part of the project is working with all the stakeholders across the watershed, about 50, to collect projects. And as Pamela was saying, the watershed boundaries don't match political boundaries, and so for the RAP to be successful, we really need all of the stakeholders who have a role in water quality to contribute. We had a great turnout yesterday at RAP Day, great discussion focused on projects, and so looking at how to be a little bit more innovative. For the RAP, we're collecting projects on 2 timelines. So one, we're looking back in time. The model that Pradeep is developing is going to be through a certain period of time. And then what we want to do is make sure we're still capturing the good efforts that happened since then, as well as knowing that the second a project's completed, we may not see those water quality benefits in the data set that's in the model. So we do want to make sure we capture all that. But very importantly, we're looking forward. We want to be able to show DEP and EPA to give that reasonable assurance that there is a plan moving forward. And as Tony mentioned, we'll be setting these targets. So we'll have the current loading from the models, we'll have the target, and so that difference is going to be the load we need to reduce. And to achieve that, we need to have a robust suite of water quality related projects that are above and beyond those permit requirements and a lot of the efforts we're doing today. This slide, I know it's a lot of words, probably not readable, but the punchline is there's a lot that can be done. There's efforts already underway using a lot of new technologies. We talked about some of that yesterday, shared some lessons learned. But we are looking to address a suite of sources across the watershed. So looking at different stormwater treatment from the typical, building ponds and swales to a little bit more innovative, like using nutrient reducing media and building more regional scale treatment, tackling septic systems, so where possible, connecting those to central sewer. Traditional septic systems are not meant for water quality, so sending them to a wastewater treatment facility where they could get a higher level of treatment, or there's a lot of great new technologies for on-site treatment that does address nutrients. Also looking at our wastewater treatment facilities and where we can improve the nutrient treatment so that when we reuse that water, we're not putting too many nutrients in the watershed. So we are working with stakeholders. I think the number from yesterday was about 35 of our 50 stakeholders have already submitted projects, several hundred projects worth. So we'll be working with the model to determine the estimated benefits of those projects, to see progress, and then working collectively with the stakeholders from there on where we can fill in the gaps where we're short in portions of the watershed. So we'll continue to coordinate for the rest of the year on that projects.
Thank you, Marcy. Okay, we're going to close and talking with Tiffany Busby from Wildwood Consulting on compliance and assessment, which is an exciting prospect, right? That will be at a place where we'll be there. So let's envision for a moment we have a RAP that is in place. It is approved at the state and federal level. Everybody in this room is excited about it. The municipality signed on. We're good. We're actively taking action. We're doing the things Marcy just said we would promise to do. Talk to us a little about how compliance works with the RAP and how we will be assessed and what that process is like. What can we expect and what can our audience expect to see?
Sure, thank you so much. Hi, everybody. I'm Tiffany Busby. I'm with Wildwood Consulting and part of this team as well. So there are really 4 components to compliance and implementation, which is a lot. I think sometimes we're used to just like one thing that's considered in terms of if a plan is successful, but because this is a watershed plan, we want to look at it from several different angles, and that's how DEP approaches it. So the first one goes back to what Marcy just talked about, which is projects. So the projects that we provide in the plan that show us a path of how we can meet water quality standards, are those projects moving forward? Are those projects being funded? And are we getting, new ideas as we go along? And if projects don't move forward because maybe they lack funding or there's a design or technical detail where they can't move forward, what are our alternate plans to those if the specific project that we talk about today in the future, can't move forward? So that's a big one. But like Marcy said, we're estimating the value of those projects and the load reductions that those would achieve, and they are estimates. So the second part, and I was really glad that Ed Sherwood emphasized the data, is that the data are really important in terms of monitoring of that we actually have new current data to measure progress. So never want to skip over the fact that collecting those data is a key part to that, because then we compare the actual data of how we're doing in the water, not just our project estimates, to how are we doing? Are we meeting those water quality standards? Are things getting better in different conditions, drought or no drought? And then finally, there is a connection to the regulatory side of things. So to the stormwater permits, they call them MS4 permits for kind of short, and also to the wastewater permit. So, and we decide what we want to say about those in the reasonable assurance plan, and that's one of the great things about doing a RAP, is that what we say we're going to do is up to the local community here, but then, those plans are tied to those permits for those folks that have a permit. So there is a regulatory tie-in as well. So it's about projects, it's about data and how we're really doing in the bay itself with nitrogen, phosphorus, and chlorophyll, and then also about the regulatory side too.
Thank you so much for that, Tiffany. And I think that's also a great lead in to just remind folks that this is a collaborative process. Yes, there are stakeholders who are going to be subject to the allocations in our RAP, and we're excited and challenged and scared about that. But it means a better, healthier bay, but you have a role to play as well. And so we just wanted to leave you with contact information for both myself and for Tiffany, who's leading a lot of our facilitation and interaction with stakeholders. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have a question about the RAP, or if you have a comment or idea, be it a project you'd like to maybe potentially see implemented, or just some thoughts on how we can move forward, better engage, whatever it might be. We're interested in your feedback as always. So we really just want to thank our panelists and this RAP team for working diligently. We are constantly engaging and on the phone. For those, some of you in the audience have been a part of those meetings. And thank you all for being here today to hear about the RAP.